Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 74, Chapter 74, entitled Like a Rat in a Maze. The bus rolled to a stop, and the students exited the vehicle, each of them catching their first glimpse of Jim Zeta. Izuku sighed. Good luck. You'll need it, he murmured to himself, remembering the bedraggled appearances of the Class 1B after they had finished. What do you mean, Midoriya? Jiro questioned, turning to him, bringing the class's attention to him. He flushed. Just Jim Zeta. It's very challenging, he said. But you said you'll need it, as if you wouldn't need the luck yourself, Jiro pointed out. Well, I'm not participating with you. Why not? Kirishima questioned. Izuku almost expected the principal to appear out of nowhere to explain, but he didn't, and so trying to ignore how everyone was looking at him, he explained. Nezu has me helping him in the control booth. Why would you be helping him? Asui asked, her head tilted to the side. He shuffled and swallowed. Because I've done the gym before. If I participated, the results would be messed up. Plus, Midoriya will be making sure Nezu doesn't go too far in his little experiment, Aizawa said, looking at them with a tired gaze. Too far, Denki repeated. Yes, he'll help Nezu keep injuries to cuts and scrapes. Maybe a burn if one of you fails badly, but there should hopefully be no broken bones. Aizawa gave a crooked grin, showing a hint of teeth. Though, accidents do happen. The class shuddered. The sound of a vehicle approaching signaled Nezu's approach. The principal smiled. Ah, good. You're all here, he started, giving a clap. I will quickly explain how Jim Zeta works. To put it simply, it's a maze, but unlike standard mazes, its layout will shift and change as you move throughout it. But not only do you have to deal with a shifting maze, the maze itself is filled with obstacles and traps. Oftentimes, they'll block your way from getting to the center. My maze has several difficulties, but don't worry, I'll keep it easy. Easy, Bakugo scoffed. Nezu's teeth gleamed as he smiled. Yes, I would rather not be sued for having a student die. It would be too much of a hassle. By setting the difficulty to easy, the traps are kept to non-lethal levels, though some of the harder traps of easy can break bones, which my assistant will make sure I don't activate. The class turned to Izuku, who shuffled awkwardly in response. Nezu rubbed his paws together. There were only a couple of slip-ups yesterday, only one of which resulted in a broken bone, so I say he did quite a good job. Now, for third-year students, I would normally let their teacher demonstrate how the gym works, but I wanted to see how the first years would do. Class 1B was my control group. They've only had the standard education of UA, unlike you who have had an actual fight with villains. I'm curious if this will have any effect on your performance during today's test. Aizawa gave a sigh. Please get to the point, Nezu. We don't have all day. Nezu nodded. Right. Sorry, I do tend to get carried away. Now, today you will be working either together or alone in order to reach the center of the maze. It is your choice if you work with someone or not. I will be recording the time it takes for everyone to reach the center of the maze, but I will also be recording the time it takes for all of you to reach the center. Now, in easy difficulty, you are not allowed to use your quirks, but other than that, you may use any skills you have in order to proceed through the maze. Come along, Midoriya-kun. Izuku followed the principal into the control and observation room, not surprised to see Recovery Girl sitting in a corner with her arms crossed, since that was where she sat yesterday. Aizawa sighed and followed after them, pausing before he entered the room. He turned slowly to look over his shoulder, and the only thing he did was give them a wide, toothy smile. Try to survive. With that, he stepped forward, and the door closed. Nezu laughed. You really do love psyching them out, don't you, Aizawa-kun? Aizawa just gave the principal a flat look. Better me than a villain. Nezu just hummed and sat down at the control booth, and Izuku took one of the two remaining chairs. Aizawa sat at the final chair. All right, students, are you ready? Nezu asked after clicking a few buttons. On one of the many screens, he saw his classmates nod. Would you like to do the honors, Midoriya-kun? Nezu questioned. Izuku shrugged and pressed the button. The doors to Jim Zeta swung open, seemingly by themselves. The students stepped inside and were faced with multiple paths right off the start. Izuku glanced over at Nezu, who was eyeing up some of the buttons. Yesterday, Izuku had a crash course on the system and how it worked, so he wasn't completely surprised when the principal pressed 1 and he saw slits on the wall open up, a visible gas exiting out. Izuku reached forward, bringing up the speakers, doing his job of explaining the traps to the students. The gas is only a knockout, but it will fill the room within a minute. That got the students moving, who had been eyeing the gas warily, covering their mouths with sleeves and such. Soon, though, he saw them split, 5 people to each of the 4 paths. Soon Izuku had his hands full dealing with a cackling Nezu who was having fun separating the students, despite some of them doing their best to stick together. Aizawa had been regulated to riddles, which was probably terrifying, hearing Aizawa giving a riddle, with Nezu's laughter in the background. Izuku frowned as Nezu separated even more students, and then Izuku eyed a couple of screens and saw a couple students close to each other, only a wall separating them. He reached over and pressed a couple of the buttons, lowering the wall and rejoining them. Nezu just grinned, sipping his tea. Then his paw twitched, and Izuku immediately said, "No." Nezu looked at him. Izuku shook his head. "No boulder." The stoat sighed. "Fine, no boulder. Yet." Good enough. Izuku would take what? Oh dear, Nezu had managed to activate an acid trap that required students to parkour across it. Oh well, it wasn't that dangerous unless the person fell in, but if they did, the acid would immediately drain and one of the medical bots in the wall would take care of the student. The acid was also really weak, according to Nezu. Still, it would sting them if they fell in. Try not to fall in the acid, he warned Ojiro and Shinso, who were nearing it. Acid? He saw Shinso's mouth move, looking even more exasperated. Though there was no sound, obviously Shinso hadn't spoken. Izuku turned the mic back on. Be glad it's not the boulder. Shinso's face morphed into surprised horror. Boulder? Glancing at the other screens, Izuku pressed another button, moving another couple students to meet up, only for Nezu to send them down a trap chute into a riddle room. Unfortunately, the students were Denki, Hagakure, and Ashido. They did not pass Aizawa's riddle test and were sent back to the beginning. Izuku kept doing his job as Nezu's assistant, making sure Nezu didn't terrify them too much, while also helping to undo some of Nezu's planning, working to guide them back together. It took a couple hours, but eventually everyone passed and entered the center of the maze at various times. Mineta and Bakugo had faced the jello, and Bakugo had a scowl on his face, hands sparking. Izuku took a little bit too much glee when Nezu gave a chipper. No quirks! The 2 boys had to half-wade, half-swim through the green jello. Nezu turned the speaker on as the last students, Koda and Sato, arrived. Well done, everyone. If you all take turns going into the chute, then we'll have you out of Gym Zeta in no time at all. Hatch? Uraraka questioned. Izuku saw that Todoroki was standing directly on the chute hatch. Nezu pressed the button, and the chute opened, sending the boy plummeting down, and then back up and out the front of the gym. How is this allowed? Jiro muttered, clutching at one of her arms where she had a run-in with the arrow trap. You signed waivers when you signed up for UA, that we were allowed to use harsh methods of training. If this is too much for you, then leave, Aizawa said. It will only get harder over the years. A few minutes later, all the students were outside. All right, that was fun. Now would you students like to see your teacher do it? Nezu asked. I knew you would do this, Aizawa hissed, narrowing his eyes at the principal, who smiled. The students answered Nezu's question positively. Don't worry, Aizawa-kun. I'll have Midoriya-kun helping me out still, Nezu said, rubbing his paws together. Aizawa's expression didn't change. What are you planning? Nothing to worry about, Nezu chirped, but did not explain whatever it was he was planning. And yes, Izuku was worried about it. Nezu opened the door to the control and observation room, letting the students enter to watch the screen as Aizawa exited. Recovery Girl got up from her spot and started healing the students. All right, let's up this to hard difficulty. No need to traumatize the students after all, Nezu said, rubbing his paws together. Is he always like this? Denki questioned. Izuku gave a nod. All right, Midoriya-kun, time for you to learn what some of the other buttons do. These buttons are for the more lethal traps. Izuku paid attention, noting down what commanded what, and where it activated. Nezu grinned. Good, now don't be afraid to activate the lethal traps. Aizawa-kun is strong enough to handle them. Izuku blinked, looking at Nezu. What? Oh yes, I didn't tell Aizawa-kun, but I do believe he's getting used to my pattern of setting off traps. Either that or he really is getting too good for hard mode, so I figured I would have you set the traps for Aizawa-kun this time. I will, of course, give him any riddles for riddle traps, but otherwise this will be your show, Midoriya-kun. As you probably suspect, this is also a test for you. Can you keep Aizawa-kun away from the center of the maze for an hour? Nezu sipped his tea, glancing at the screen where Aizawa was stretching a bit, getting ready. Of course, to make sure you're properly motivated, if you fail, you will have to go through the gym on medium mode. Izuku swallowed, now properly motivated to stop Aizawa. Last time he had gone through medium mode, it had been with Mirio, and it had been horrible. Students, just so you are aware, in medium and above, you are allowed to use your quirk, though I can give handicaps if I choose so. But Aizawa-sensei's quirk isn't useful here, Ashido said. Nezu just chuckled. Not every hero's quirk is perfect for every situation. This gym allows me to introduce you to a bunch of different situations. Unrealistic, perhaps, but it is good training to help you learn how to get out of different situations with and without your quirk. Now, the principal turned the speaker on. Are you ready, Aizawa-kun? The man just narrowed his eyes at the camera. I do apologize for the wait. I was just giving the students some information about the purpose of this gym. You may proceed. Aizawa went to the door and opened it, only to immediately roll forward as Izuku activated a trap filled with slime. Sorry, Aizawa, but I do not want to do this gym again, he mentally apologized, giving Aizawa no time to pause as he opened another button, unleashing a giant robotic minotaur. The black-haired teacher scowled and used his capture weapon to move around the creature quickly and crash it into a wall. While it was stunned, the teacher took to one of the two paths, sprinting along and jumping wall to wall as Izuku activated a pitfall trap. Holy shit, Midoriya, Kirishima exclaimed. Izuku didn't turn to them as he said, I don't want to do Gym Zeta again. Mood, Shinso said. Izuku led Aizawa into one of the riddle traps, and Nezu delayed the man a good minute with his riddles before Aizawa was moving on. Sorry, Sensei, Izuku whispered. Nezu cackled as Izuku hit one of the buttons. Aizawa launched into the air, but he wasn't hit by the giant bat, as he used his capture weapon to change course. He landed in another part of the maze, which with another press of the button, started rumbling, the walls moving closer to each other. Izuku's stomach churned, even as he pressed another button as the teacher escaped the last trap. This time it was a trap path, one that always led to the same place, but more complicated than the circle one Izuku had done, considering it had multiple turns in both directions. It trapped Aizawa for almost 3 minutes before the man realized and found a latch on one of the walls, exiting the trap area. More and more traps were activated, and Aizawa was able to avoid or counteract most of them, only getting the occasional wound. But as he got closer to the end, Izuku pressed another button, one which released a clear sticky substance on the floor and walls. Then it was the final trap before the center room, one that was already pre-set up, a giant maze of shifting pipes that he would have to crawl and wiggle his way through. But he also had to avoid getting hit by the shifting pipes. The only thing that Izuku could do was choose pipes to be electrified. It was an Aizawa with smoking hair that made it through the pipe maze, looking like he needed to nap for 1,000 years. Nezu clapped his hands, turning on the speaker. Congratulations, Aizawa-kun. It only took you... Nezu held up a phone, and Izuku held his breath. 1 hour and 12 seconds. Izuku let out a breath of relief, slumping down in his chair. This seemed pretty tame for you, Nezu, Aizawa commented, his voice being heard through the speakers. Tame! The class yelled out. Damn, and I thought Midoriya was being pretty mean to Aizawa-sensei, Kirishima said, eyes wide as he stared at Nezu. Nezu chuckled. That would be because it wasn't me controlling the maze. Aizawa just sighed. Of course. Izuku hit the button opening the chute, even as he said, Sorry, Sensei. Aizawa waved a hand. You did what you had to, Midoriya. With that, the man stepped into the chute. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 74 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 75 will be up next. I like this chapter a lot because I think it's cool that the author had Aizawa going through the maze as well, but I think it's really great that the author had Izuku planning the traps and that Nezu kind of forced Izuku into that position as well. So let me know your overall thoughts and reactions to this one, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.